Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a great day. NASA, Jason. Nobody seems to be able to comment educated on NASA because we don't know, right? Like, I don't work for NASA. I don't know anybody who works for NASA. And we basically, as far as we can go on the topic, is I'm sure they know more than they're telling us, which
Let's
we all
trust
agree.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, like which we all agree, but then we kind of leave it there and go about our daily lives. So today's going to be a little refreshing where we have Darcy Weir, a filmmaker, young guy, also a proud Canadian like we are, but he has done a deep dive on what NASA has collected, sensors, videos, even their own personnel. And if you're like us, where you thought the buck stopped with, well, NASA knows, but we'll never know, I think you might learn something that there is a lot of information out there. You did a fabulous job compiling it all. And we want to ask him some of the big questions, like what does all this mean military wise, politics wise? How does this involve the experiencer phenomenon? I think it'll be a cool show and one that we haven't done before, Jay. I know
No,
for
well, I
me
don't.
anyway.
Yeah, I don't think that we've ever covered the Fastwalkers, the crafts that are coming from outer space that are entering the atmospheres. We haven't covered that. We
Yeah.
covered everything else from the atmosphere to inside the water. But this is an interesting subject because it proves that at least some of the visitors or visitations that we have are coming from off world. They're not from here.
Yeah, good
And
point. Good
yeah,
point. A lot of
so
people say that, they're already on Earth, they somehow manifest or they transition through dimensions, or however that would work. But
yeah.
it's pretty amazing when NASA has actual footage of things coming from out of orbit into that and then into the atmosphere of the Earth. It does back that up. So it's going to be an interesting show. Not too deep of a dive. We want to get to a lot of little snippets. So we're going to cover a lot of material. We'll keep it fast flowing. And we'll learn a little bit more about today's guest, Darcy Weir. So with that, we'll be right back. We'll play some fancy music here, Jay. You got her queued up.
I love it.
And we'll be right back with Darcy Weir right here on UAP Studies Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of UAP Studies Podcast. My name's Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my best buddy, Jason Gilmet.
I'm excited for today, Louis. We're doing two interviews. This is our second interview of the day. We got Darcy, and I'm going to admit something to you, Darcy. I have seen your films. I did not put your name to those films when Louis put your name on the calendar. I'm like, oh, cool. This guy did a documentary on space UFOs. That's so cool. I did not put the two and two together until I saw all the information. I'm like, I've seen a lot of these movies. I know who this guy is. So I'm sorry I didn't recognize you from the start. It's amazing and humbling experience at the same time. It's great to have you on, man.
Hey, thanks. I honestly hear that a lot, believe it or not.
We're going to fix that today, brother. We're giving
So
you the
many
platform.
people are just like, who is this guy? Like, what?
And many thousands of people more will now know who you are at the end of this. So, and it's cool because we're talking about something we don't talk about often, which is NASA. And I think everybody kind of says tongue in cheek, we all agree NASA knows more than they allude, but that's about as far as the conversation can go because we don't work for NASA. We don't know anybody who works for NASA. They're not talking. So it's really a moot point. So it's good that you've put so much time and energy researching this, getting actual evidence and proof, and putting it together in a really well-made film. So welcome to the show, first of all. It's great to have you here, fellow Canadian. Glad to have you, buddy.
You bet. Thanks for having me, both of you, Louis and Jason.
Yeah, and Secret Space UFOs, Fastwalkers is the name of the film. Darcy has produced over 15 full-length feature films. He's traveled worldwide doing this type of thing, and he's even gone so far as to say it is his mission to make this more accessible for the general public by just shedding light on it through film and other projects. So you're very much like us. We're not doing this for the notoriety, the fame, the money. We're doing it for the topic. And so why? Let me ask you, why NASA? What specifically about this became the topic of your next project, so to speak?
Well, yeah, I'm very interested in the UAP topic in UFOs, and I have been for about 20 years now. And I started looking into this to topic because I was friends with this guy named Jose Escamilla, a former UFO researcher and documentarian. He was actually famous for making UFOs, the greatest story ever denied. It's an oldie but a goodie, and I think I watched that in university after I started kind of looking into the idea that maybe we're not alone in the universe. And Jose was making this documentary, sort of spacey documentary series. He did two on the moon. I think one of them was called Moon Rising, and it was all about anomalies on the moon and stuff. And he was actually working with another Canadian guy that I'm friends with, that I've collaborated with on this series. His name's Kerry Martinuk, who, you know, went by Luna Cognita. And he's out in Ontario. But anyways, this guy and I got together, started chatting, and I said, look, I want to like really dedicate some time to fleshing out some of the material you've collected, combining it with some of the history and research I've done and the interviews I've done with subject matter experts in the UFO field, and just really make a strong thesis of, you know, the fact that NASA has been suppressing UFO events and UFO encounters, the whole phenomenon, from the public for a long time. And I think it's timely that this documentary series is out because, as you both may know, NASA is currently embroiled in investigating UAP officially, publicly. They have a research group of 15 dedicated scientists from different fields and backgrounds, and we can talk more on that, but I just think that whatever comes out from that research group better be UFO pro, in my opinion, just considering the history that I've kind of uncovered of certain anomalous events that have transpired throughout NASA's existence and their exploration of space as a scientific group on behalf of the American public, on behalf of mankind, really. And you know, some people don't really realize, but NASA was originally started as NACA in 1958, and that stood for National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. And soon after, not too long after, it like within a year, it became NASA, which is National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And they were extricably linked from the very starting to the Air Force, and later on very connected to the Navy. And I think all of the intelligence agencies in the United States use NASA to some degree when they need to. You know, they're the greatest science geeks that the United States has to offer, and they know everything about aerospace. And that is the greatest frontier for mankind in terms of dominating or exerting military supremacy. If you rule that theater, aerospace, outer space, and, you know, our airspace, then you're going to do pretty well in terms of getting what you want as a economy, as a society, so on and so forth. And so I think just originally when I started making this series, it was actually 2017. And I had been looking into an individual named Dr. Jack Kasher, who is featured in this documentary. You'll recognize him for like the kind of funky science lab with like a little monitor that has like a green blip going across it in the background and like a sort of like pink light tinge to it. So Dr. Jack Kasher was a NASA employee at one point. He worked with them doing research on the nuclear physics of the sun and possibly some classified studies around energy effects. He wouldn't talk about that, but he talked a lot to me when I reached out to him in 2017 and interviewed him in his science lab at Nebraska University about UFOs. And a lot of the stuff that NASA had been doing for many years at that point that he knew of, because he would reach out to NASA to get clarification regarding certain UAP events that happened in space. And originally, I collected a lot of that interview data, and I was planning to just have it in one documentary, but I ended up, putting it into this greater documentary series that you guys have now seen a bit of, and here we are today talking about, NASA and secret space UFO encounters.
Do you know what I love about this as well, Darcy, is we've covered a lot from the aspects of, when they're underwater, when they're in our atmosphere, when they land on the ground, when there's an interaction between the occupants of these crafts and civilians or military personnel. What fascinates me about this is that from the get-go, NASA must have already had some sort of contingency plan in the event that their astronauts, when they send them to the moon, would encounter something that's not from here. And they executed that, by the sounds of it, when they landed. And we got Buzz Aldrin that mentioned that he saw something. They switched over to the medical or the private channel and communicated. So from the get-go, NASA was aware that this is a possibility when you go into space, and they had planned for that. It still surprised them, still surprised the astronauts. But what do you think, from the get-go, from the word go, when we first went to the moon and we encountered these entities, what do you think happened at NASA to make them all of a sudden take interest in this and to keep it quiet?
Well, if you take a look at some of the previous documentaries I've done in this series, Secret Space UFOs in the beginning, or Secret Space UFOs, NASA's first missions, we basically break down the very first NASA designated astronaut missions, which is the X-15, which was a rocket propelled jet that was mounted to a modified B-2 bomber to the wing of it. And it would take off when it was high up, fly into low Earth orbit. And, these are the first pilots to be designated astronauts. And two of those pilots, Joe Walker and Robert White, they both claimed that they saw UFOs. And one of their reports went into Life magazine in 1961, and talked about, how he thought it would just be something prosaic at first, like something that had come off a tank or something on the craft, or maybe a piece of metal or whatever it was, but it wasn't. It seemed to be keeping pace with the craft and moving alongside of him. And so that really, stuck with him as a anomalous event. And it looked like a typical UFO of the time would be, I guess, some kind of disc shape. The other pilot said that he had seen 3 or 5 of these craft flying above his X-15 when he went up. And he said at a conference that he was speaking at, where he leaked some photos of a craft that he had taken that was in space, out of Earth orbit, or in Earth orbit. He said that, this is one of many photos that I took, and actually NASA had tasked us with taking photos. And this is the 1961, 1962, like this is since the inception of NASA, and they first started going to space. And if you look at the idea that NASA is connected to the Air Force, connected to the Navy and intelligence agencies. They also most likely follow the same classification and safeguarding methodologies when it comes to information not reaching the public. So, President Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, enacted Executive Order 10501 back in 1951, post World War II. At the end of 1951, they wrote it up. I think it went through in 1952. And essentially what that said, that was the first legal framework for academic institutions linked to the government, scientific institutions like NASA, and military and intelligence agencies to legally safeguard information from the public, meaning classify information. So I think from the get-go, NASA has been legally allowed to cooperate with intelligence and military agencies to safeguard information from the public. They've been allowed to classify information. And if you look at some of the documents that we got out of NASA in some of our previous documentaries, you look at, for example, the transcripts from the astronauts' black box flight recorder that they either had on the VTR during the Gemini missions, the Bridge to the Moon missions, or the actual Apollo missions where they went to the moon. They had the DSEA flight recorder, and they talk about anomalous stuff that they're seeing up there. And researchers like Carrie Martinuk and many others have poured through these documents since they were released. And it says on the very front page, classified, now declassified after 12 years. So why would NASA have to classify transcripts if they were worried, about censoring something from the public in the first place? It just means that, information is controlled in our society, especially when it comes to space-related matters, because certain things that were seen or done up there might be of a national defense concern. And if you listen to the lore of UFOs, and many different statements and documents that have come out from memos and communications between the military, multiple different military officers and departments throughout history, we always see the same pattern of UFOs being above top secret, being more top secret than the atomic bomb studies of Oppenheimer days. So I think from the get-go, NASA has been in on the secret to some extent to do with UFOs. I think they have procedures to cover that up. And I've been documenting that they've been doing that to some degree for more than 5 decades at this point, since their inception. And this latest documentary covers from 1973 until now. And multiple UFO events that have started in space. We find out, the word Fastwalker originates from the Air Force, from NORAD. And John Greenwald, who's a really intelligent researcher in the UAP UFO phenomenon community, originally did Freedom of Information Act requests and tried to get Fastwalker documents and such from NORAD. But we saw that term come up in many of their manuals, in the Air Force manuals, as well as NORAD manuals and documents, and they refer to Fastwalker events. So events where space-based objects are anomalously moving very fast, obviously with some kind of intelligent design, meaning they're operating with intelligence, dropping into our atmosphere, moving around Earth, or just staying above the Earth's atmosphere and moving around in space. They also note slow walkers, which are a known object that are of little concern, and those would be your typical satellite, because a satellite just moves across space, gliding over the Earth, you know? And so we covered Fastwalker events in this documentary. We cover space-based UFO anomalies that have been caught on satellite technology, that have been caught on ground-based radar and tracked with, radio telescope technology. And then we cover like actual cameras recording these anomalies in space off of NASA's space cameras and astronauts' cameras.
Yeah, they always seem to, point at, it's whenever there's like a live feed or a video, something to do with NASA and something's flying through, it's always, that's ice. Even if it looks like diamond dust in a formation of things, that's just a whole lot of ice, or it's a spent rocket booster, or that's just space junk. But in your film, you featured quite a few videos that were amazing. Like, and I want you to talk a little bit about some of those. The one that I think for me was craziest was a formation. It looked like a formation that spanned half of the planet, with one in the middle finally lighting up. And you can tell these things are moving intelligently. You've tracked some of them that are going one way, they stop and then go the other, like non-Newtonian physics. These things are under some kind of intelligent control. So maybe touch a little bit on some of the video footage that you have in your film.
Sure. So the one you're talking about with the formation over the horizon of Earth, it's also in black and white color that we explained earlier in the film. That's actually a technology called far light ultraviolet camera technology. So it's literally being recorded in a light spectrum that the human eye can't even see in. And the reason why they would be doing that, again, I think, is for them to have excellent view of any anomalies or strange things that are out there in space. Otherwise, you would just record in regular light spectrum that our normal cameras can do. So that's STS-80. That's where that video clip comes from. And that was over Africa. And you see, I think, about 8 objects that are forming a circle. And then one object kind of starts off opaque near the camera. So obviously is traveling past the view of the camera, past the spacecraft, and then goes into the middle of that formation and illuminates. Highly anomalous, very weird looking. And to me, so for people to understand, when it comes to space and any spacecraft being up there, if you're talking about, let's say, the shuttle, for example, I think just the shuttle being up there and drifting, it's traveling at about 14,000 miles per hour. Okay. So if you see something passing the shuttle and then stopping and remaining in one place in a formation that is also sort of staying in a synchronous pattern and moving, those objects are moving down into the atmosphere and possibly back up, it looks like, because you can actually see the layer of the atmosphere above the horizon of the Earth in the distance. So you have all these indications of what these objects are doing, possibly. You have to imagine that this thing is traveling faster than 14,000 miles per hour and then stopping and, being part of a formation. It's very odd. So what you could explain that to be, if you are just using conventional terms, is maybe this is like some kind of top secret satellite system that NASA is recording on behalf of, an intelligence or military agency, that video will be later reviewed by them or something. But when you when this video is speculated upon in the past, guys like Jim Oberg have remarked that that was simply space ice, and space ice doesn't operate like that. So I don't know what it is. It could have been, UFOs as we conventionally think. It could have been some kind of top secret technology also. I don't know. But I know that it's not space ice. In my logic, there's no way. Jim said that that one that moved into the middle was space ice because it only becomes fully observed later due to near Earth conditions and probably like burning up or something like that, right?
Right.
I don't buy it.
Yeah. And what fascinates me in your documentaries, you point out exactly how many freaking cameras there are in space. Like whenever we see space image from, the satellites we got like Hubble and now James Webb, but the ones that are pointing back at the Earth, we don't normally see those pictures. Occasionally a few from astronauts, but there are so many cameras. And you were talking about the DSP satellites, and there's over, I think you mentioned 283 Fastwalkers that were detected by these satellites. The activity, and these satellites are all over the planet. I mean, it's not just localized. This is everywhere that's picking up. The amount of activity that has taken place globally on any given day is, I don't know how to, I would say astronomical, but it's a lot of activity. The planet is like a beehive. They come and go as they wish, and there's nothing we can do about it. With NASA and the Army sort of merging together now and creating Space Force, in your opinion, having studied this, NASA and the military's interest in what's going on in space, are we picking a fight, or are we just trying to give ourselves a bit of comfort by saying we can control what's above our atmosphere if we have military personnel there? Is that like, are we out of our depth here?
Yeah, I mean, like the Space Force, which is the sixth branch of the military now, and apparently they're supposed to be, sit above all others at this point. It signifies somewhat what you're saying, that they're trying to create this perspective, probably for adversaries as well as citizens here in North America, that they got this covered, right? Like they're going to have supremacy in space. And Alara, who's in the documentary, covers Space Force really well. She actually has like a segment at the very end, and I definitely wanted to bring her in because we were talking for like years about her research into Space Force and how she'd been speaking with a high-ranking military official that worked for the Space Force and was finding out really what they're doing. And essentially, it comes down to getting better data. So they will be like releasing satellites and enabling artificial intelligence and monitoring airspace and outer space like never before in the public eye, probably somewhat too. But then they're also going to be like probably putting up some kind of weapon systems in the future. I think that theater of war is the ultimate theater of war. If you command that theater, then you command the planet somewhat, right?
Yeah.
And people are all afraid of Russia that has these new types of missiles that kind of come down as fast as an asteroid, right? And there's like literally no detection systems supposedly that could prevent or stop these from striking a country, right? Which is scary. If you think about where we're at this flashpoint right now between Russia, China, and the US, you don't want one of those coming down. Yeah. So Space Force could be one of these defense agencies that's preparing to protect away from that, protect the country and North America from these types of arms reaching the countries, right? So I think Space Force is good to some degree. And I think, obviously, if we're going to become a spacefaring nation, civilization, and we're going to be following the direction of NASA by putting bases on the far side of the moon and publicly, and also going to Mars with Elon Musk's endeavors, you're probably going to want a space force backing them up, right? You're going to want some kind of military presence that's able to escort, observe, and protect and defend these American or American allies' interests, right? And Canada, for example, we're all Canadians on this show. We've been active in space with NASA for a very long time, right? Especially with the Canadian space arm. A lot of those robotic arms and stuff you see on the shuttles those are our inventions, and we're constantly aiding NASA in their endeavors in space.
Yeah, and in terms of those inventions and sort of machinery and personnel in space that NASA owns, I mean, you had Skylab in 1973, right? The first scientific observation laboratory.
Space station.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then
Before
since
ISS.
then, but yeah, that's right, way before the ISS. And then DSP, the sort of Aerojet company spy satellites that are very specifically looking for things coming into and out of orbit. Like they would be the greatest UFO tracking satellite you could have.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the ISS and even shuttle missions. So maybe give us some thoughts on NASA's own people that have seen this and their own hardware that's picking this stuff up. What do you think? Like, how can you say no when it's your own people that are saying, yeah, I've seen this? And, even going back to the guys who went to the moon, some of them have openly said they either believe or they have proof, and that's the reason they believe.
Right. I mean, a lot of the astronauts that did go to the moon do not talk about their encounters with UFOs in space. I know that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin kind of talked about their encounter with Apollo 11, something kind of following them to the moon that they were tracking. They thought it was the S4B, which is an upper stage of the rocket that got them into space. But obviously it wasn't. It should not have been that. But there haven't been a lot of astronauts, and most of them deny it. If you even look at the Gemini missions, Gemini 7, Frank Borman, I'm thinking.
I'm horrible with names, Darcy.
He reported a bogey during Gemini 7, and that kind of hit the news and was being reported in all these magazines and stuff. And Frank Borman did a lot of work to debunk that. And in fact, there's a C-SPAN interview I included in NASA's first missions where it seemed like the reporter had pretty much finished her line of questioning, but didn't want to leave out that UFO encounter and make sure that he mentioned that and debunked that, because UFOs have always been sort of an interest to people in the public. And he said it was silly and it was just a rumor. But why would you refer to something in space as a bogey, right? He said that we were trying to identify the Agena stage for the spacecraft. It was like a rocket system they could link up with in space once they were in orbit. Their capsule could, and it didn't make any sense logically, but he claims that, they were just trying to find that. And when they found it, they called it a bogey. But bogey historically means an adversary or unknown in space, in airspace, right? So there's been little sort of things like that, and many instances where astronauts seem to cover it up. And I think it's because astronauts have to. They probably have sworn to some kind of secrecy about this. You do get little leaks, like Clark McClelland talked about something. I don't know if he was completely crazy or maybe wanted some kind of attention, but he said that there was like an alien encounter, like an alien astronaut meeting in space during his time at NASA. And there's all these like little anecdotal stories, but when you got video of it, when you've got imagery of it, like we have in this documentary and some of the other documentaries in this series, you can't like it. It's one thing for people to really speculate hard on, to not just brush it away and dismiss it as bogus, right? And the videos and the imagery that come up on these missions come in all shapes of sizes of UFOs that people have typically seen in the atmosphere on Earth, like this little sphere that's, over my shoulder here, and triangles and disc-shaped UFOs, right? So it just seems to be a continuity of the same sort of UFOs that we see in outer space that we've also seen on Earth, reported by multiple different experiencers, military personnel, and the list goes on. So to answer your question, if we've got these satellite systems that are picking up so much of this data from the 1970s until now, and in the documentary Fastwalkers, we're essentially covering a small sliver of information, and you said it was 283 sightings, right?
Yeah.
So imagine, and that's just from the DSP satellite system invented by Aerojet in California.
And only up till 1991. That was from 1973 to 91, where there was 283. So the number is far greater than that up until today's date, just even off that one satellite.
Right. So fast forward to today, for example, right? That infamous second congressional hearing on UFOs just happened. Sean Kirkpatrick was heading it up, said some disappointing things to the UFO crowd. A lot of people were up in arms about that. And what happens subsequently after that? Christopher Mellon comes out and says, we have satellite imagery that is super high resolution, of many different UAP sightings. And what is he referring to? He's referring to probably all kinds of defense satellites that are far superior to the DSP system that ended in 1991, that have been picking up super high resolution video, still imagery of these objects interacting with our planet. And obviously Christopher Mellon knows about that. And again, this documentary is kind of timely because we're at this precipice where NASA is about to reveal in June of this year their findings on their UAP research group's efforts. What are they going to say? I mean, I was talking to Richard Dolan the other day, and I said, why would you put together a panel of 15 scientists unless you were really going to put something out there in the public that serves to push some kind of narrative or to validate an existing narrative, right? So I'm hopeful that they're going to say something about UAPs being real. And apparently they've been getting documentation and access to content far greater than Arrow has even had.
Right.
So there's hope in the idea that these scientists are going to look at this data and be like, okay, this is anomalous. This is not ours, or maybe it's an adversary's, or maybe it's extraterrestrial, maybe it's interdimensional, who knows, right? The fact is that we have lots of evidence to date that space-based UFOs are a thing. and NASA probably knows about it. I hope that they come clean about some of this stuff that's happened throughout history.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because we're all putting this phenomenon together. We're realizing that these things are coming from somewhere else in the universe or our galaxy. They are entering our atmosphere, then they fly through our air, they go in our water. Sometimes people see them go through freaking mountains or solid objects. It's just weird. But it is happening. And when you start seeing it's not just compartmentalizing, like, oh, let's just investigate it when they're in our air, over our air zone and flight patterns. They're everywhere. Like, it's not just the planet, it's outside the planet. They're monitoring the whole system. I think the whole concept of Space Force is try to control the distance between the moon and the Earth and control the inner, outer, comings and goings of these entities,
Yeah,
or
it
wherever
would
they
be
are from.
cislunar space is the area that you're talking about.
Okay, I didn't know that. So can you explain that a little bit for me?
In between Earth and the moon, that's called cislunar space.
Okay.
So it's the space between our two astral bodies, right?
Okay.
And so you're theorizing that Space Force would be protecting that space.
That's
Yeah.
all they could, I think, be able to control is maybe that distance, if they even have that technology. We know they're recruiting people, but do they already have the ships, or is the ships already built now? They're recruiting the people. Like, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg question.
Yeah. Well, we know that they have an autonomous shuttle. They've been using the X-37B for many years now, and that can go into space for a year.
That's crazy.
What?
Wow.
That's an Air Force space vehicle.
Right.
That's a shuttle that the Air Force doesn't even have to put personnel on. It goes up, goes around, looks at things, comes back down.
Right.
What has it been doing up there? What has it found? We don't know. It's all classified.
And it would have to be drones, I'm thinking, that we'd have to put up there, because they would have to move fast. You couldn't have a body in there because of the limitations and the complications of having a living, breathing being in there. So it would have to be drone or AI.
Well, that thing is a giant drone.
Yeah.
It's a shuttle-sized drone. Does it go to the moon? Does it go beyond? We don't know.
Right.
I mean, we may never know. That's the Air Force's intel.
Yeah, and the Air Force is so good at talking, right? They've been saying so much for 75 years.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you something I've always been stuck on in terms of sort of global efforts in space. And there's a lot of work between Russia and the USA. There always have been, right? They dock together in space, they shake hands, they're on missions. I think, Mir and all that stuff was always a very close relationship. But when we talk UFO and UAP, we're like Russia and China, we got to watch out. But yet we're collaborating in space. So you know better than me. Are they still doing that as far as Russia goes? And if they are, how do you keep your secrets yours, but yet try to find theirs at the same time? Like, that seems awful complicated to be fighting a space race, but yet working together on the same project.
Well, 2 weeks before Russia invaded the Ukraine, there was an announcement by the United States that they were ending the International Space Station program.
Okay.
So I knew, I know it sounds like, I guess, narcissistic to some degree, but I had a hunch that something was coming when I read that headline. I can send you the article, but yeah, I don't think the space relations are very positive right now. I mean, astronauts are not shooting each other like in Ad Astra yet. They're not running around in moon buggies shooing machine guns at each other.
That was a great sequence, though. That was a great sequence.
It was cool.
Yeah.
Maybe that will be a possible future, low gravity space wars, but I hope not. Could be pretty hard to clean up that mess. But look, you've got the announcement that they're ending the International Space Station agreement. So, I mean, but I just saw that Russia was doing a spacewalk at the ISS just like yesterday or something. So they're still up there. whether they agree and work together, that's another thing. And will it become hostile at one point? I'd say so if, we do end up start getting missile launches coming from China or Russia, that type of thing will quickly turn the theater of space into also a war zone. So that's just my logic. How much they I don't know how they operate together in a space station that's connected. Maybe they're going to decouple it at one point. Maybe that's just something they're trying to get around to. So, but I do know that the United States has a project to build a space station like 2 times the size of the ISS further into cislunar space. So between the moon and Earth. Right now, the space station just sits above the Earth. It's one of the further out objects, although there's probably all kinds of classified satellites that the Department of Defense has launched into outer reaches of the solar system to monitor things coming in and out. And Richard Doty mentioned that in the documentary, that there is a track record of that apparently happening. But a official station that's deep space, that's in between the moon and Earth, that's coming. Another one, and that'll probably be solely American or a collaboration of allies with the United States working there.
Yeah, and I think with even disclosure, that brings about 2 situations. It's either we play nice in space as a species, that we go, because obviously when we start mining for
gold
and everything else,
energy,
like on the moon, silicon, whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be crazy. And we have a very competitive nature. We don't like to share. There's an abundance in space, but the resources of us being able to go out there and get it is going to be a costly venture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm worried about, is that it's going to create war. Like you mentioned, having ships go to and from, let's say, the moon to harvest things. And you would have ships that would protect them. Obviously, that makes sense. But if we're all doing that, competing with each other, there would be some battles in space amongst, because we're so stupid, right? We just can't get along. We're like a bunch of ants, and
Well, what do you always say, Jay? We have all these weapons in space, but they're pointed back at us, not to outer space.
Yeah, everything's pointed back at us. We're so stupid. It's like holding guns to our heads. Like, you move, I shoot. You shoot, I shoot. That's so dumb. But if it is that, like let's say disclosure comes about, the government says these things are real, we need to work as a species together for space exploration, for at least establishing that we all agree we're getting visited by one or several civilizations and the implications that it means. But at the point that we're at right now, Darcy, do you think there's any chance for a global, like working together globally on this issue? Because it still seems like it's compartmentalized. You're Canadian, you're studying a United States project, for space, and you're an expert on that. You don't even live in the States. So the fact that everything's compartmentalized, even within the country of the United States, you got all these different departments that do these different tasks. None of them talk to each other. What's our chance? Like, where are we sitting right now, do you think, with disclosure and unity on this matter?
Wow. I think that's something I couldn't really predict. Like I obviously I'd like to say that we could work together with other nations, but right now is it's probably going to be really hard, just considering that tensions between the East and the West are at like the highest they've ever been. We're in a warm war, not a cold war, not an outright war just yet. But we're sending ships over there and stuff that's looking kind of bad, right? And if you look at the relationship souring, and even Canada recently stating that the diplomat from China, I can't remember, foreign relations politician from China, was persona non grata, meaning like not welcome.
Yeah, expelled.
Yeah, like that's not looking good, guys. It looks
No.
like we're enhancing our hostilities more and more as every day goes by in 2023. So if they did announce that UFOs exist, it's kind of like a situation where, you know, you were just mentioning, Jason, we got guns to each other's heads, right?
Hmm.
And, you know, you've got these guns to each other's heads, and somebody walks up at this like showdown that's in the background, guys, goes, "Hey guys, uh I know you're about to shoot each other, but there's aliens. Aliens are here." And they're like, "Uh-huh. What do you want us to do about it? We're about to shoot each other." I
Yeah.
mean, it might be a situation like that. Or, I mean, Ronald Reagan did that famous UN speech, and he states, sometimes I think how quickly we would unite as a civilization, as like a group on Earth, if we found out that there was a extraterrestrial threat out there
Yeah,
that was
resolve our
non-human.
differences, right?
It would solve our differences,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, would that actually go down? Would that be the play? I don't
Yeah.
know.
A lot
And
of people believe that the entities have something to do with this as well. And
yeah.
that was the first question I had written down to ask you, and now's the perfect time. So, does disclosure come from us or the sort of heads of Earth, or does it come from them, whoever the hell them are? Like, do you think that there is some involvement where we are only doing as much as we are allowed to be doing, and they are ultimately in control? What do you think?
I don't know. You know, you hear about stories anecdotally, like the Holloman Air Force Base landing, where apparently an extraterrestrial got out of a craft and met a high-ranking official on the landing strip there, and they walked off to have a chat, right? Um, and that's a contact incident. If it's real, that's amazing, and it
Mhm.
means that we've had conversations with off-planet, well, non-human intelligence. I don't know whether they're off-planet or crypto or you know, ultra terrestrial or even interdimensional beings, who knows? But scientifically, the possibilities for those types of things existing in our galaxy is real. And if we've had these meetings with certain leaders from certain countries that have brokered a deal or something, it's totally possible that disclosure is a rolled out event that's agreed upon mutually by two different parties that could benefit maybe one or the other or both at the same time. Again, this is a possibility. I don't know for sure that this is certain, but I would be getting in some serious Stephen Greer hot water when I mention the next possibility, that maybe not all of them are good out there.
Sure.
Yeah.
And maybe you can't pray or meditate to bring all positivity or positive extraterrestrial contacts to you. It's possible that, you know, as on Earth, there's a mixed bag up there in space, or just in existence around our planet and outside of it, to deal, you know, in nature. And so disclosure, if it came that way, like Ronald Reagan uh, spoke about, you know, saying it would unite humanity and give us something to fear outside of our planet instead of fearing each other, I actually don't see a problem with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen Greer sees a problem with that,
You know,
but
yeah.
are they us? You know, like I think about it kind of like this, like um if somebody walked into your home and said, "This is how you should live," and you say, "Wait a second, this is my home. I've been living here for a long time and I'm comfortable with my lifestyle." You know, that would be kind of the appropriate answer. But if we are going into space as a society, as a civilization, and we're, making our own rules as we go, I think that's more beneficial to our own sovereignty, to our own, growth as a species, so we can figure out what's good and what's not. Just being told something never works. I mean, do you guys have kids? Have
Yeah.
you seen your friends that have kids? When a kid is told to do something, their first reaction is to figure it out on their own and not to listen. And I think as a species, we are kids. And if we go into space, uh, as a premature civilization, we're probably going to make mistakes, and we're probably going to be, if somebody tells us not to do something, we're going to try and do it anyways, right? That's just our nature. We need to learn from our own mistakes. So, I think disclosure is good if it happens a certain way. You know, this is just going to be part of our human evolution, and I don't know if it's going to go down a certain way or not. But I think we'll see.
Yeah.
There's a new documentary on Netflix. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's on chimps. It's really fascinating, like the imagery, I think it's in 4K, and they study these chimps. They follow them around, and it's fascinating because they're so like us. The way that they socialize, that they have, each one of them has a role to play. They're very valuable. And you have these people that spend months with them, recording them in the woods. The apes don't know what the humans are doing. They don't know what the camera is. They're oblivious to it. They're just living their lives and doing their own socializing things, accepting that these entities or beings are there and obviously doing their own thing. But to us as a species, the Homo sapiens, the surviving humans, there was other humans. We are the only surviving ones. We have a hard time grasping the concept that maybe we are the apes in this situation, and that we are being observed by something else that is smarter than us and has better technology that we don't understand, way above our pay grade. It's just the admittance of that, just to be able to say, hey, wait a minute, let's hear what they have to say. Because obviously the way we're doing things is not working out. We're constantly at war. Think about how much misery, the bulk of human misery is caused by humans, right?
Yep.
So it's why not try it their way? Why not just listen to what they have to say? Maybe we'll find a better way of being on this planet. Consciousness is always being brought about. A lot of people that we talk to, it keeps bringing that about consciousness. Consciousness also makes you aware of other people, connected to other people, causes empathy, causes you to see things from their point of view, makes you, appreciate another person. And I think that's what we're getting more nowadays, is people validating other people. And I think that's important. I think this is a step in the right direction. We're still stupid as a species. We still are self-destructive, but we're beginning to become aware that other people are entities as well, the same as us, and we're more than just physical bodies. This is just operate on this plane. Only 5 senses. That's very limited. We're trying to solve a big problem, like a big Lego masterpiece castle, and we only have a few blocks, right? And we're trying to figure out how the whole thing works. So this level of investigations that you've done for, on NASA and about NASA is as crucial as any other aspect of ufology. And if not more important, because we are seeing that this activity is coming from space, that these things are entering from a different location into our atmosphere. And then we have another branch of study, which is about what they're doing in the sky, what they're doing with people, because obviously it's a big operation. Darcy, I don't know about you, but I know for us, we're blown away by the cost of this operation for them, because these crafts are designed to come here. They have rooms inside of them that are like hospital rooms designed for a human to be on, to have these, gadgets come out and do experiments on people. It's a costly venture for them. This would cost us trillions of dollars to execute. So it's interesting that they're here, and it don't seem to be causing us any issues right now. So that's kind of positive.
Yeah, I wonder if like costs or economy are even a thing to some of these future advanced societies.
Good
like
point.
That is a human construct for sure, right?
Yeah.
And it creates a pyramid of power. It creates essentially leaders and servers surfs. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole range of phenomenon happening here. And if you believe in abductions, which I made a documentary on that, I believe that there's truth to some of that. Certain leaders in this research field will say, oh, that's all just my labs and human led experiments and stuff to trick people. All aliens are good. I don't know. But there's lots of reports of these types of things happening even today. And so it makes one wonder what is this all about? Is this a opt-in system? Are these people being warned before they're being taken? No. It's very intrusive. It doesn't sound like, it sounds more hostile and advantageous to one side, to one of the parties, than to the person that's taken aboard a craft or something, right?
Right.
So I think there's some really interesting implications to do with that. And perhaps, the American military knows about that, and other militaries around the world. You got to realize that all over even China has had UFO experiences where they've had to shut down airports because unidentified flying objects are flying right within the flight path of landing aircraft and taking off aircraft. That's happened in history. We have had Westall 66 in Russia. We've had the Bent Waters base, Rendlesham incident in the UK. In Africa, the Ariel school. In Peru, we had a pilot chase and shoot at an object with their Sukhoi Russian jet.
Iran had the similar
Iran,
thing.
yeah, we covered the 1976 Iran mass witness event at night where, there was rolling blackouts in the city, and thousands of people saw and were frightened of this two objects that were flying over that city. This happens everywhere, so it leads one to believe that we're not in control. And I think the militaries of the world want to allude to the idea to their citizens that they have control. And I think the UFO incidents either are our tests from advanced parts of certain militaries around the world, checking out other countries and possibly testing their capabilities, or they could be from beyond Earth. They could be from some extraterrestrial source, and that's really interesting. Both implications are really interesting to me.
And it could be a hybrid of the two as well, right? It may not be 100% one or the other. And I think opinion and experience plays a lot into how you look at the phenomenon. You had a good friend of ours on your movie, Jimmy Blanchett, who, as we know, is using moon bounce technology, broadcasting basically a radio cannon into space, way more wattage than you would need. And when we had him on our show, I said, Jimmy, isn't that kind of like, you don't know what the hell you're doing, man? You're making noise in the woods. You don't know who's out there. And he said, never had a bad experience. None of our CE5 groups have ever had a bad experience because we're inviting loving entities into our life. And I've chatted with somebody who's a trained remote viewer who says that these things can be downright evil and will mess with your head. And sometimes you observe things and they're aware of themselves being observed, and the energies are there. And, so I guess opinion plays a role in it, but also experience. If you had an abduction experience and it was really traumatizing, you may not think they're so friendly. But if you've had somebody who's had like a Kundalini experience or like a spiritual awakening, it's like nirvana on planet Earth, and there's nothing but love and good. So I definitely think opinion plays a lot into this. And, your movie did a good job of not taking a side. You presented all the evidence and you left it there for, intelligent people to make their own opinion. And that's essentially what we try to do with this show. And I think you did a very good job with your film.
Absolutely.
Sure. I appreciate that, guys. Yeah. Jimmy Blanchett, really interesting researcher, scientist.
Yeah.
somebody who's actually testing out their own technology and trying to see what happens. We had Seth Shostak in the documentary and kind of compare and contrast. Look, this guy's looking for signals that are coming from light years away, that we probably will only ever see once, because the way that a light year works is it's thousands of human years away. And by the time we probably send a response back, they're either going to be dead, or maybe we're dead before they respond to that second response. But their whole protocol, when I asked Seth, what if you do get a signal that seems to be highly anomalous and could be from another solar system with intelligence behind it? He said, well, we have to, once we rule out that it's not from Earth or not from some, quasar or prosaic explanation, then we have to decide whether we reach out and reply. Because there's implications that maybe there's dangers to that, that you're inviting somebody that may have nefarious interests, right? But yeah, Jimmy, all of his communications are positive. I hope that he's only inviting positivity. I'm sure, if you're a human and you send out a bunch of positive postcards to strangers, you're going to get a couple creeps and assholes that, sorry, you can bleep that out. You can get a couple.
That's okay. We leave it in.
All right. You can get a
We used to swear a lot, and now we don't swear enough. So it's refreshing. We like it.
Yeah, it might kill your algorithm with YouTube, though, but you'll get some creeps that will come to the party, some know-it-alls that are blowhards that want to control the conversation and totally punch down and treat everybody like they're idiots and
state absolutes. That's the part that irks me.
State absolutes.
Yeah.
Some of those creeps will state absolutes, and some of them will just outright hurt people, and I worry about that happening to Jimmy, but so far it hasn't. And he's a good guy, he's a friend, and I wish him all the luck with his research. And I hope that, somebody from a academic institution watches my documentaries, sees what he's doing, and they rule in on that. And they even help him understand what these messages are that he's getting on his walkie-talkies and why they seem to defy physics in a certain way. I would invite that, and I hope that Jimmy has the opportunity to get certain folks to reach out to him after seeing my documentary. So, yeah.
I think it's Nikola Tesla, again, our boy that I always quote, but he said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing here, that when humanity starts discovering or investigating or researching the non-physical world, it will do more advancement in 1 decade than it has in the last 100 years. And I absolutely believe that this guy was on a different level, right? Just somebody that we all should admire, because he contributed to humanity in such a huge way and got zero out of it. You know what I mean? It was a selfless act, and we needed to be more like him. And these days, we mentioned this a few times, but science and philosophy need to merge back together. At some point, they took their own separate ways, but I think they need to merge back together, especially in this phenomenon, which is not really a phenomenon, it's an happening, right? It's no longer strange. We're realizing that it's a daily occurrence. So we have to merge those two back together to understand what's our place in all of this. Where are we at? What does it mean on many different levels? And it takes people like yourself that puts this on the map, puts it out there for people to say, hey, just pay attention to this for 2 seconds and listen to what I have to say. And you bring pieces of the puzzle together for people. And that's great, Darcy. Where can people find you?
Oh, thanks, man. They can find me on Instagram, Darcy Weir Films. They can find me on Twitter, Occult Journeys, and Facebook, Darcy Weir. Probably missing some. YouTube, Occult Journeys. I just put my trailers and some stuff up there too. Thanks for having me on, guys. And if people want to check out the film, I'll send you a link that they can check it out anywhere in the world by just clicking one link. And a lot of my previous films are available on Tubi TV, Amazon Prime, iTunes, Apple TV, that type of thing. Tubi TV is completely free, and you know, a lot of that stuff is available in Canada. So if you have a lot of Canadian listeners and they want to check out my back catalog, I think there's about 12 films that are free on Tubi TV. So feel free to check that out. I really appreciate you supporting me as a you know, theorist and researcher, and just a filmmaker as well, you know, by having me on and letting me speak my piece to this stuff.
Yeah,
For
we
sure.
really appreciate it, man. You're a smart guy, well-spoken. You're open-minded. You don't have, you're not hardened and chiseled like a lot of people that, you know, have formed their opinion 30 years ago and have a hard time getting out of that. So you're doing good work. And I mean, let's be honest, since 2017, a lot of new people are starting to look up and starting to read, and they don't know all the stories going back to Roswell and Rendlesham and, you know, all the deep, dark stuff. So you did a very good job taking a complicated subject, breaking it down into digestible format that people can watch and learn something from. And we'd love to have you back again sometime in the future.
For sure.
Yeah. So you're always
Thanks,
welcome,
guys. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, any new movie comes out, you want to come on and promote it anytime, Darcy, you're always welcome here, man.
I appreciate that. I'll definitely, now that I know we're neighbors, maybe we can go for a beer sometime.
Let's do
You
it.
got it. Let's aim for that. So Darcy Weir is our guest today. Louis and I really appreciate everybody. Please leave comments below this. Let us know what you think of this conversation. What do you think about this whole subject? If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so, and do follow Darcy as well. His career, he's very informative and contributing to this field of study in a big way. So thank you everybody for listening. Louis, I'll see you. I think tomorrow we're doing another interview.
See you tomorrow, brother.
And Darcy, stay in touch, okay, my man?
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Louis. Have a good one, guys.